No, Scotland were not robbed by the TMO. I know that's the reason that all of you guys are watching this video, but there's another 79 minutes of rugby to discuss, so we can figure out how the French were able to get a very surprising win against the Scottish. My name's Max, I'm the host over here at this channel, and a massive thank you to my patrons for all the support they give me. It was very scrappy, very tense for the French and the Scottish, with a bit of rain controlling the game, getting a bit of handling errors involved, and wowzers, we got a very messy end, so without wasting any more time, let's dive into the match, do the analysis to see how the result was decided. Let's get into this. During the match, France's ball handling was atrocious. Scotland on the counter-attack in the 7th minute have been given a chance to punish the French for this. What they're trying to do is best explained by the animation we now see. With the forward as the first receiver and the fly half in the 12 channel, such a shape we can see gives an attacking team the opportunity to send a fullback over the gain line with 3 possible methods. We'll return from the main method of using this shape to a still of the match footage with Russell in the 12 channel and Gilchrist in the 10 channel. Gilchrist has initially been in such a position because he's intended to follow this arrow and tackle Malvaka. Having knocked on at the previous phase, this is why the French surround Finn Russell. Once Van der Merwe wraps around as per this animation, Russell will have the entire back line and Turner on his outside. But because Walkie, Antonio and Cross were initially shaped in a 3-man pod to attack, they haven't had the time to follow the black arrow and slide across the pitch to tackle the extra carriers. For this reason, they default to a rush defence in an attempt to shut the play down and get Scotland to play in a scrum. Knowing that the back line they're in the best position to gain metres, will now play the slow-mo of George Turner's decoy line to showcase him making it harder for France to slide across. Because Danty and Fickou can both legally tackle all 3 of the Scottish backs to the left of your screen, Turner can't be penalised for obstruction. Now we'll hold the pause on Turner and zoom out a little to showcase Scotland's attacking options. The first is for Van der Merwe to remain on Tuipulotu's inside shoulder, so that he can slot between Cross and Danty to run for the line. The second is for Tuipulotu to use Van der Merwe as an unlikely distributor for a hands down the line, while the third is for Jones to give that same inside ball to Van der Merwe, with this carry instead going between Danty and Fickou. Noticing the huge amount of grass in the backfield, Tuipulotu chooses the second option as we see in full motion. But we'll play this passage again so that you guys can see Hugh Jones' decoy line. Jones runs in front of Danty, so Fickou is the only defender that can mark Van der Merwe. As we pause, Fickou's defensive line is shown by the white arrow, while Bielle-Biarrey gets stuck in a 2-on-1, meaning Ramos will need to exit the backfield. The key to it all though is Jones. As Ramos marks Rowan Patterson, will continue to keep the spotlight on Jones to see that he continues to run his decoy line until 6:55. Fickou is on the ground after tackling Patterson, Ramos is marking Rowe, but Jones is passing to an unmarked Ben White. The reason this works so effectively is because Jones continues to run this line. Bielle-Biarrey, as pictured on 6:51, also needs to slide across to the backfield. The problem is though that with Bielle-Biarrey highlighted in this freeze frame, nobody else in the French lineup can mark White, who is already offside during Jones's decoy line. As we watch it all in full motion again, we can see White no longer offside as he takes the pass from behind Jones. While Bielle-Biarrey tackles Jones, White goes over for Scotland unmarked. Scotland build the pressure really well, they extend their margin to a 10-point lead, but I think that across their 2 games in the Six Nations, guys, we're really going to start noticing a theme with this Scottish side. I will say Scotland's defence here is pretty compressed, and it's no wonder why with 3 French players on the ruck as Fickou takes the ball on 30-33. Fickou's definitely out of form right now, but gives a crisp pass to by as Bielle-Biarrey wraps around. We'll pause on the wide shot to show that 14 French players and all of Scotland's players are in frame, but what we zoom into looks like unbelievably rubbish attack from France. Bai could definitely slot between the 2 defenders, but with Olivon as the nearest forward and 2 backs on his outside, it's pretty unlikely he'll get a decent ruck clearance. While I'm sure there would be people crying in the comments over this, Van der Merwe doesn't exactly have much reason to spread out. Props aren't known for their distribution, but the issue is that Bai is an exception to the rule. Jalabert has organised some deceptive work very well, and with Bielle-Biarrey as an inside option, sucks in the defence brilliantly. The thing is, while all of the commotion has been in this circle, Gael Fickou has wandered around from about here to about here, whilst out of frame and covering 15 for Ramos. While this is by no means an easy pass to take, the stroll over to the try line is pretty easy. Now that we've had a discussion about the first half of this match, let's roll an air break before we discuss the halftime stats. While France are down by a 10-13 deficit at halftime, Scotland were beating them in pretty much everything. There were lots of handling errors and a lot of really just inaccurate things happening on the pitch in the first half, and with these possession stats we can see that Scotland were mostly in control of the match with their kicking game. Scotland were winning most of the attacking stats as well. The one real area that was surprising me though was France getting a bit more dominance over the breakdown. Scotland were really not giving France much to work with. They were really nullifying them at a lot of those breakdowns, so I was surprised France were able to bring their total to 3 turnovers in that first half. The big thing is though, France were tackling at a very high percent, and that's perhaps why Scotland couldn't quite make the most of a lot of the attacking opportunities that they had during this first half. Really good to see both teams there, kicking at 100% and some very high ruck success for both teams, making this kind of area of the contest a lot more bearable in comparison to the crazy amount of kicking that both sides were doing. France just missed one line out where Scotland just missed one scrum, but as we can see, not only was there inaccuracy kind of allowing the Scots to have control of the game in comparison to the French, but the French discipline wasn't exactly the best. Scotland were offered 6 shots in total at the three-pointer from the goal, and they decided to take 2 of those shots at goal, so that definitely did not help the French, their discipline. There was also a yellow card for a bit of a clumsy incident involving Winnie Antonio, so though a lot of the stats may not show it, Scotland were definitely the better team in this first half. The thing is though, we're about to discuss a fair bit of the second half, and you'll notice I don't really cover anything from the 40th up until about the 67th minute, as the Scots really took their foot off the gas. Let's explain how the French were able to really just get their comeback to finally start with Scotland perhaps having a bit of a daydream. France with Olivon shifting from blindside to open side and Cross shifting from open side to number 8 do especially well to take advantage with their captain Gregory Aldred off injured. Cross opts for a simple pick and go from the base of the scrum, getting a wee hand from Rumar on debut. Rumar holds Christie's jersey, forcing White to hold a 2-on-1 against Cross and Legaric. This allows for Cross to run about 10 metres while Scotland can't afford to jackal as they need to get their players back on side. Anyway, while we show Cross going to ground, we'll spotlight Rowe to show a serious moment of autopilot. When Legaric picks the ball up, Rowe calls for White and Dempsey to help cover Tuolangi, who is out of frame. It's fair enough that you want your men to take Tuolangi down, but while he does this, Rowe doesn't even examine his own channel until 69-22. Rowe's positioning here is quite frankly terrible, as he gives himself just a single shoulder to use in a tackle. Now guys, for those who have watched me long term, I've discussed side-on tackle techniques in several previous videos that I've uploaded, and it's not exactly ideal when you have just a single shoulder to do the job with. Because Rowe is side-on, Patterson doesn't really have a choice but to shoot up and cover. This now leaves a huge gap in behind. Bielle-Biarrey finishes an outstanding individual try. Ramos' second penalty goal now stretches the scoreline out to a 20-16 lead for the French with about 4 minutes to go. So despite Scotland without question being the better team for basically all of the game, being dominant for much of the first half, it means they now need to try at the end of the match to get the win over France. So I think we'd better explain this officiating decision. While every couch coach believes this is a try, let's put a spotlight on the referee. As Skinner drives towards the try line, the referee observes from side on so that he can see the ball from a better angle. Taufifenua and Moe Whana tackle Skinner as Tuolangi binds to the ruck, while the referee is pretty darn close to the ball if you ask me. While he obviously doesn't have a GoPro attached to his head to prove to us, the referee cannot tell if the ball has touched grass. While you can see the ball over here, beneath Tuolangi's forearm, it's above his forearm when he binds to the ruck. There's also 3 boots as well as the forearm in front of the ball once it goes beneath Tuolangi's forearm. There's no way for the TMO to visually see the ball touching Skinner when it's this low. As we can see from the alternative angle as well, the ball is leaning towards Skinner's teammates upon Tuolangi's bind. So, is the ball touching the grass? Most likely. But is there obvious evidence, filmed by a camera, that shows Skinner touching the ball when it is over the try line? No. The TMO is therefore correct not to award the try because there's no evidence that the grass the ball is touching is past the point of the try line. You see guys, while you can get angry at a referee all you want, it's not going to overturn the fact that Scotland went into autopilot and they allowed the French back in the game and they made the ref responsible for deciding a game. If a referee has to make a decision that will determine a game, it means that you've not worked hard enough and because you've not done the necessary work to convincingly lead the scoreline. When you're winning against opposition, you want to continue building the momentum, working harder and harder and harder, but Scotland seriously do lack the mental toughness to do so. We're going to go through the full-time stats, and as we look through these stats, we see that possession is a little bit more in favour of the French, as is territory. So France, their kicking game got a little bit smarter with Luku off the pitch, I do believe, and France are also catching up to Scotland on a fair few of the attack stats. While Scotland did start to get a bit more breakdown dominance back into the game during this second half, not every player kind of was buying into this idea that the Scots needed to continue extending their lead. The tackle success as well, considering how many tackles France made in comparison to Scotland, it's very nice to see them have a higher accuracy there rather. That was really helping the French just stay in the game, that high tackle ratio. It was also awesome to see that Scotland had a higher ruck win percentage than the French, so, you know, it just proves France really had to work for those last few points to get themselves over the try line. Because you see, all professional athletes, they work very hard, but one team, they worked harder than the other, and that was what made the referee had to make that final call. We also see that France didn't quite have the stamina in the lineup, but they remained very dominant over the Scots in the scrum as well. And we also see with the French, they did not concede any more penalties inside their own half during the second half of this test match. It's a bit of a struggle to constantly see Scotland have such talent, have such excellent tactics, but still consistently fail to win the big games. I'm starting to get quite frustrated watching the Scots, and it's starting to feel like a second coming of 2021-2022 with Ian Foster in charge of the All Blacks. Gregor Townsend has been in charge of the Scottish environment for far too long for the excuses to be made. He needs to stop picking guys on form. He needs to start holding the team's cohesion, continue that combination building. You see, Hugh Jones, Sione Tuipulotu, they play together at club level as a midfield combination. Why can Townsend not continue that same ideology of continuity for the other key decision makers of this team? Scotland are one of the older teams in the Six Nations, and if they want to start winning trophies, it's now or never pretty much. If Scotland do not place at least third in this tournament, I think it's time for Gregor Townsend to get the sack. There's 2 World Cups now that Scotland have not progressed past the pool stage, and it's just starting to get a bit ridiculous that they have all this talent, but they just cannot seem to get the big wins when it matters most. And the problem is for Scotland as well, with Finn Russell running this team, he just cannot manage a game. I've talked about this before on my channel. But as for the French, you know what, guys? I thought that after watching Ireland, this was going to be the big game where we got a lot of the answers to the questions that we asked after Ireland. You know, is something wrong with the French culture? Were they too dependent on Dupont? I think we've actually got more questions to ask now because France did win this game. It proved that yes, they can still fight it out with their mental toughness, but they certainly did not look convincing getting this win. So I'm afraid that we're going to have to wait for a little bit longer to ask a lot of these questions and answer them about the French. I think we're going to have to wait till this year is over to really get a grasp on where the French are, because they certainly aren't where we would imagine they would be. So thank you so much there, guys, for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. Do remember to subscribe to me, like the video, and leave your thoughts down below in the comments. I'm sure there's going to be a few conversations about, that last minute referee decision. Just remember to be respectful and everything, because emotions certainly can get the best of us in times like these. Thank you guys one more time, and one last thanks to my patrons. I'll see you on the next video. Cheers from Max.